Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm Tony Haggerty, Haggerty10 on the Twitter handle, and I'm joined once again by Sean Martin at Sean Martin TCW. The small matter of a 2-1 win in Dingwall last night, Sean. No drama, nothing much to see. Move along, 3 points banked. End of pod. Yes, it didn't quite play out like that, did it, Sean? You were on the match report duty and probably had it all filed as a one each draw.
I never quite clicked publish like the couple of occasions you saw it last night. No, but it did mean that not everybody, it did mean that a few ratings get bumped up one again once it became clear it was a win rather than a draw, because the result does play into it. But no, it was like, even with the Ross County goal, I still felt Celtic were by far the better team, and it was well, I'm sure we'll come on to individual performances, but it was a makeshift team. And you've been saying it for a while, it is literally just getting the win. But I would argue that the manner in which they got the win last night was very, very unorthodox, but almost just as worthwhile. Because in a way, it showed you that it's 14 wins in 16 games. It's hardly that they're in it's hardly that they're searching for a win that they can't find. But winning it in that way, when it did seem as if all hope was lost, I think we probably both agree on that. It looked as if it was going to be right. Well, 6 points or whatever it was going to be, like that kind of thing. But we're going to need to be talking about that. So to win it in that fashion and to keep their heads and keep going, and I think you'll notice they didn't just lump it either. They did do it the way that they said they were going to do it. And then obviously to be Anthony Ralston of all people to pop up. I said in my kind of taking stock piece that I put up this morning, he's maybe the most unexpected goal scorer this season. Because it's just adding yet another thing to his CV now.
Well, Sean, I said on the pod last night on Celtic State of Mind, see if they're struggling for a centre forward for Sunday. Why would you not even consider putting Ralston up front? He has got natural goal scoring ability. And it's not as crazy as it sounds, because the goals he scored this season are textbook striker stuff. So I'm genuinely, if I was Ange, I would possibly consider it, because he looks like a natural goal scorer. He took that goal. How early was he up?
It was his desire.
How much did he want to win it?
Exactly. You could almost see the desire from him in that second to be the one that won it. So.
And I'll tell you something else about the goal. Moffat, and I know it was just a wee shunt to McGregor, but he deserves credit for sticking to the process, as you say, and not trying to be the have-a-go last-minute hero and taking a wild swing at it. But
I agree with that.
It went out wide, and then Tom Roderick did his magic, and a brilliant cross just hung it up there. But Owen Moffat thought, I'll shunt this out wide. Time's marching on, and the temptation would have been to just pull it down or try and take a wild swing at it. But
no, I think that's a great point. I think you could level that at any of the players involved in that wee move. Obviously, it's more impressive that it was Moffat as well, because, to be honest, who would have even blamed him for having a pot shot at that point?
Yep.
But for him as well to do it, as you say, it was only shutting that across to McGregor, but he still done it. McGregor slipping in Rogic rather than trying to cut back onto his left and having a shot. Rogic, rather than taking an extra touch or two to try and maybe win a penalty at a time, whatever, lofts it up to the back post for somehow Tony Ralston.
Right, here we go. Frank Brennan comes in, 56 Ralston.
There we go.
And he comes back. David Bradley comes in, says Ralston my player of the year so far, class stuff, son. Frank Brennan comes back in. Morning, guys. Without doubt, Ralston's goal last night can be near absolutely decisive and determine who exactly wins the league title when May comes around, and the lift is enormous. David Bradley say, I've got that one. Yep, indeed. So lots of love for Anthony Ralston. And Tim Anon comes in and says, did Ange come to Parkhead in a DeLorean? Because that was centenary stuff last night. And Edward Diver comes in, this roller coaster is some ride, still buzzing. And Brian Roberts comes in, Tony, our best goal scorer. That's what I mean. Tony Ralston's the most natural and best goal scorer. Can you imagine he played number 9 on Sunday, Sean? I know you can't see it, but
no, I can't see it. But speaking of makeshift number 9s, I did think Liel Abada done well. And I think we'll both be giving each other a wee nod here for having hypothesised this way back in September when Kyogo got injured the first time, that he might have been able to at least somewhat replicate what Kyogo brings, and rather than like as I say, I don't think Turnbull had a poor game at the weekend. I think he was asked to do a job he's unfamiliar with, but I think you could tell it was a job he was unfamiliar with. He done all right, but as I've said a few times, most of his best work was done when he dropped deeper into his more natural attacking midfield positions. Abada, I thought last night stuck to kind of what he'd been told to do, which is almost a Kyogo light kind of performance. I'm not saying he was anywhere near the quality of Kyogo when he was on the ball or even the tracking back, but I think he'd done it all to a decent standard, and he gave a focal point, and I think he deserves credit for that.
Now, the other major talking point was the Starfelt sending off, Sean. Wanted to get your take on that. I spoke and people have disagreed with me, but I said I thought that Starfelt should have been a wee bit more robust. I know I didn't think it was a deliberate or malicious elbow. Should the officials have spotted it? Yeah, but I don't even think the TV cameras caught it. And I think the only one that was claiming for something was Starfelt because he ended up his face covered in blood. Now, I don't advocate players injuring other players, but I just thought it was an agricultural centre forward challenge which goes in and central defenders every other day of the week.
I don't think it was deliberate. It didn't look deliberate. It would have been sore, right enough. It clearly was sore. But in terms of talking about his sending off, I think the fact that he get this first booking for moaning so much probably suggests that Joe Hart was right to come over and have a wee go at him, tell him to shut up, basically.
Joe Hart had a wee slide booty back as well, by the way.
I saw that. Before you compound it by essentially getting yourself sent off. I know he did eventually get himself sent off, or I would argue shouldn't have actually got the second yellow, but I think that's why Joe Hart was so annoyed at him, because he was like, I think he could see that Starfelt was letting it get to him, which is always the crucial thing. Because whether you think you're hard done by or not, he let it get to him, which I think is the poor aspect of it. And
Jordan White was sent on for that very reason, wasn't he? To rumble them up, as they say, and he got and he affected Starfelt because he lost his shape and he lost his discipline after that. And as I say, I'm not advocating that a Celtic player sitting with a bloody nose or a broken nose or whatever it was injury that he got is fine, but I just think surely centre halves and centre forwards, that's always a classic Joe, isn't it? When you're in the air, these things happen.
I've had on my match notes. I was thinking, like, obviously they played Ross County played Ross Callaghan through the middle, but he was an attacking midfielder. So he was kind of dropping deeper than providing a focal point, similar to what Turnbull was doing the other day, which meant it was more kind of incumbent on Beaton rather than necessarily Carter Vickers and Starfelt in a traditional sense of being occupied by a focal point. I thought that would change when Samuels come on. But it didn't really. It didn't change until Jordan White came on, and that is exactly, you're right, that's why he was put on. That's always been the type of player he is. It bit Celtic in February for Ross County as well. He scored the winner that night. And obviously, in context, you don't want to over amplify how much of an impact it had, because a few knockdowns ultimately didn't lead to Ross County winning or even getting points. But it did change the game, and it changed the game for Starfelt more than anybody else.
Yeah, David Bradley says he could have cost us, Tony. Brian Roberts comes in and says, only negative Starfelt sending off. What does he expect? It's a centre forward's job to rough him up. That's what we've been talking about. Tim Manone says Hamden will suit us better than the tight Dingwall pitch. Really confident first trophy of the season. We'll get to that in due course. And Dominic Duris comes in, absolutely buzzing this morning. Proud of the guys. Man, he's a killer, me. I jumped that high. Yeah, I think there's a kind of euphoric feeling when that goal in, and B10 Hacker, I think that could be. It was more of a freak than an intentional elbow. That's the way I saw it. Now, a lot of people have disagreed, and that's fine. Their take's fine. And Frank Brennan says the cameras did catch it, Tony, and the guy's elbow gubs Starfelt right in the dish. While it was not a full launch of the elbow, for me, it was a deliberate foul, and Starfelt and rightly was annoyed. No, I get that you would be annoyed when somebody does that, but I also get that, is that not sort of part and parcel of the rough and tumble of Scottish football? And I just felt that he let that affect him, Sean, as you say, and paid a price for it by losing his discipline, and ultimately could have put the result in jeopardy and could have cost Celtic. But as you've also said, the way they played with 10 men, you would never have known they had 10 men.
And that, I mean, as I say, I do think that second yellow was harsh. I don't think that was a second yellow, but I do take the point that his head had kind of gone to a certain extent, which again is why I think Hart was so annoyed at him even a minute and a half after the incident, still went to get to him, which is what we've got a comment here from Simon, and I think that probably does sum it up. That Ange is told, I think, more than a few times, keep control of your emotions and stuff, and he obviously didn't, and I think that will disappoint him. Regardless, as I say, I still don't think the second bookable offence was an actual bookable offence, but we move on. And to your point about keeping them at bay in the last 10 minutes, I thought that, as much as anything else, was key to them being able to facilitate the way that they won that game. The way that I'm talking about, they stuck to it until literally the last kick of the game. I think it becomes easier when you play like they did after losing a man, and also after getting a potential penalty turned down, to still have that composure and that calmness to continue playing like that.
I was going to come to that. It's always a grey area, but Sean, that's a clear-cut penalty. The guys did.
I don't know if it is, to be honest, Tony. I don't think that was a penalty. I think that would have been harsh if it was in the other box. So I think it's harsh in the Ross County box too. I suppose the thing is, do you think he deliberately done it? I don't think he did deliberately do it, because it's no longer enough for it to just hit their hand. It's got to be making yourself bigger and deliberate. I think that was maybe all right. He should have his hands behind his back, but I don't think it was making himself unnecessarily wide. So
I don't know. I disagree. I think he knew exactly what he was doing there, and nobody was more surprised at him to get away with it than then you saw his face. He was like, "All right, I've got away with it."
Oh no, I definitely think he knew it hit his hand. I just don't think it was deliberate. I think it would have been very harsh. Which is not to say the referee had a great game or anything like that, but I think it would have been very harsh to give it.
I thought it was a penalty, but I guess Celtic will see justice being done by scoring the winning goal. But we all see things differently, don't we? So that's fair enough. Now, Liam Scales played last night, Sean. Very good first half. Second half, maybe not so good. But we're talking about playing yourself into contention for the cup final. The team, do you think he's done enough? I thought his ball through for a baddest goal was just exquisite. It was just brilliant, just begging to be tapped home. And I like Scales, and I thought first half he was right in the frame, but second half, that lapse in concentration, switching off, and just being totally the wrong side of your man, and not even in the shape to put in a challenge to stop the goal was been pretty disappointing if you're Ange.
I think it was very much a mixed bag from Scales last night. I actually thought he didn't start very well. I thought his first 10 minutes or first maybe 7 or 8 minutes, I thought he was looking as if he could be exposed. I thought he struggled with Hongbo's pace. At the first time asking, I thought it kind of looked as if that might be a recurring theme, but he did grow into it. I thought he grew into it really well, actually. And I thought that obviously the overlapping run, the cutback was a solid cutback for a Badder's goal. Good run to be slipped in by McGregor, which was also a good ball. I actually thought the more impressive part of his game, I thought, was the way that he handled his inverted fullback responsibilities. I thought he'd done that really well. We've already saw his composure on the ball and his cameo appearances, but that was a different kind of ball game entirely, because it was from the start. It was on a tight pitch. It was in a game that mattered a whole lot more than the 15 minutes or so that it tends to get at the end of games. And I thought to do the inverted responsibilities to the high standard that it did was really, really useful on a kind of tight pitch in Victoria Park. You're right, though, he had more than a few questionable moments defensively, lost his man at that corner, for instance. I think, all right, it wasn't a header that they scored, but it was still from a corner, and you would think that the extra height that he brings into the defence when he starts, which a lot has been made of, lest we forget, I think to concede from a set piece with him as the main man that lost his guy was probably quite poor. But overall, I still gave him a 7 because he got the assist. And as I say, going forward, I thought he was really quite comfortable. But I think probably not. To answer your question, I don't think he has played himself into contention for the final.
Who plays in the final, Sean?
Well, I think it would be Taylor. I mean, he's still a first choice left back. He's still there on the bench. The only argument I can see is maybe Juranovic left back to make sure Ralston starts at right back. It depends on the fitness of other players, I suppose, doesn't it?
All right, so you're not playing Taylor left back, Juranovic right back, and Ralston centre forward. Then you're not interfering that, no.
Always an option later on.
That if you're chasing it, yeah. But I agree. There's been a couple of comments coming in, and thanks, guys, for your comments. Keep them coming. We really do enjoy reading as many as we can. Reading them out on the show about the kind of never say die in spirit and the character and the fortitude that Celtic showed last night. They just refused to give up, didn't they, Sean? They literally did go right to the end and played till they scored, basically, Celtic, so they were throwing everything at it.
Not quite in the way that Malky Mackay implied after the game, because it was like 6 minutes added on, and I think Rogic puts the ball in at like 96:01 on the clock or something. It was quite a far-fetched thing to say after it, I think, but obviously the manner of the defeat would have hurt him. But I don't quite think it was playing until Celtic scored like Malky Mackay made out. But I take your point that it was essentially Celtic playing their game until they finally got the break.
Yeah, that was the point I was making, not about the time at all, just Celtic playing until they scored. They just refused to accept anything other than a win and kept going. And people have compared it to the Centenary team, and if you're old enough to remember that team, which I am, they scored a lot of last-minute goals. They kept going, and the similarities are coming thick and fast. But I guess it's just something that Ange's built there, Sean. That kind of never say die attitude and spirit, and you saw it in all its glory last night, really.
Well, we don't stop, it was, he says, wasn't it, at the training session at the start of the season. And there's been a few instances, whether it's, obviously this is an extreme instance of it, the last kick of the game, but there's been several instances this season. You have pointed out that Aberdeen game about endless amount of times about how important that could be. This is another one of those games. The Aberdeen game, even one of the goals in that with the quick throw in, Aberdeen defence not settled, was a we don't stop moment. I think that was a we don't stop moment, albeit in a different manner. Last night, an extreme example of it, but it is part of a bigger picture, I would argue. It wasn't just a lucky winner, it was a winner that they built towards, and I think there's I kind of pointed out in my reaction piece that's up on the site just now that the 14 wins in 16 games run that they've gone on, including that Aberdeen game, but since that has included 8 games where they've won by 1 goal margins. Now, people will point out that a lot of the reason for that would have been the lack of clinical edge that Celtic have had this season a lot of the time, and they should have won by more. But if you're a glass half full kind of guy, you would say there's a mental fortitude in that as well, winning a lot of games by 1 goal margins. And at some point it starts becoming a coincidence to me.
How crucial do you think this one will be, Sean, in the title race come May? Do you think you'll look back and think that's one of the more seminal moments of the season?
It could be. You mentioned that Aberdeen game that sparked this big run that they're on. But I mean, I don't see why not. There's been plenty of moments you've seen over the years, like for instance, that moments that mattered feature I did a month and a half ago or so, looking back at the 2011 game at Rugby Park, which was a 3-3 draw. But you can almost literally trace back the first title of the second 9 in a row back to that day, because it looked as if Neil Lennon was going to lose his job if they get beat 3-0 down at half time, or that kind of thing. These moments happen throughout a season. Some of them are more important than others, and you only appreciate it in retrospect. This could be one of those. We'll need to see it come.
Yes, indeed. And they move onwards and upwards to the cup final on Sunday, Sean.
Yep.
Goodness knows who'll play in the Celtic team. I'm
looking forward to seeing the predicted lineups. There'll surely be no unanimous agreement from the three of us this time. But
no doubt another makeshift side, and try and second guess Ange for that one will be anybody's guess. But we'll preview that in great detail tomorrow. I think one of the commenters, Edward Viabos, is just how euphoric after that game, deserves a Hollywood script. I think Anthony Ralston's writing his own Hollywood script. You wouldn't be surprised if he featured prominently on Sunday and did something like score the winner, Sean.
That's it.
Well, he will if he's centre forward. I'm going to bang that drum till somebody listens. On that note, we will say cheerio, have a cracking day, rewind and watch the highlights of last night again, keep that feel-good factor going into Sunday, Sean, and hopefully Celtic can deliver the first trophy of the season, but we'll preview that in greater detail tomorrow, fella. Thanks for your contribution, Sean. Thanks to all the commenters as well. As I say, we appreciate it, and we try and read as many of them out as we can on the show, but have a good day, and we'll reconvene tomorrow.
Cheers, Tony.